The red digits glared to 17 a.m. Back from the adrenaline still pumping from the pregnancy scare. Then I saw it. A busted lock. Muddy boot prints tracking across the floor of our shed. Our baby supplies, the bassinet, the crib pieces we meticulously assembled, scattered like trash. They'd broken in for a $29 fine. They had no idea my wife works in counterterrorism. This wasn't a movie. This was what happened when a Karen backed. Fake HOA play militia in the wrong damn neighborhood. Freeze frame. Yeah, that's me. The guy whose private well this Karen tried to illegally tap into, watering her prize-winning petunias. My response? I dumped sewage into her system. Oh, buddy, that was just the appetizer. Instant viewer question. Wait, how do you legally get away with that? And how did she not notice? Let's rewind. My wife, Sarah, and I bought this place for sanctuary. An acre of woods, total privacy. No HOA. That was non-negotiable. We'd seen the online horror stories, mailbox color fines, flagpole regulations. Hell no. So, imagine my confusion when, a year in, we started getting those saccharine sweet pastel notices. Violation notice, community standards enforcement, the return address, GMHA Glen Maple Homeowners Association, a group we never agreed to join, vote for, or even heard of. Turns out, Karen real name Cynthia, but she radiates Karen with the intensity of a supernova, had started her own unofficial hoe. Just a handful of busybodies from the cul-de-sac and a self-printed letterhead. I should have ignored it, shredded it. Instead, I made the mistake of laughing about it on the neighborhood Facebook group. I quote, "If Paper Circus sends me one more notice, I'm starting my own HOA, House of Annihilation. I'll fine her for breathing too loudly." That post, 114 likes to neighborhood memes. In one furious message taped to my mailbox the next morning, 72 hours to correct your front yard. Grass height or enforcement actions will be taken. Taped to that, a tiny, pink plastic ruler. Now, fast forward back to the real crisis. Sarah, 7 months pregnant, collapses at the kitchen sink. We rush to the her blood pressure's spiking. The doctor throws around words like bed rest and preeclampsia. We're terrified. I'm in full-blown panic mode. On the drive home, just as I'm thanking God she and the baby are okay, I see it, another damn envelope fluttering on the porch. Final warning, grass violation, $29 fine. I don't even get out of the car. I sit there, hand clamped on the wheel, staring at that envelope like it's cursed. Because I know what's coming. This isn't about the grass. It never was. Cynthia, Karen has decided we're her project. And people like her don't let go until something burns. We walk into the house. Everything looks fine. Then, I notice the back door to the yard is slightly ajar. The lock on our tool shed is snapped, dangling like someone ripped it open with bolt cutters. I run to it. There it is, muddy boot prints, baby supplies, the crib we just built, boxes of diapers. A sterilized portable bassinet tossed aside like someone rummaged through it looking for drugs. There's even a footprint on the baby blanket. Sarah doesn't speak. She just stands there, frozen. Her hand instinctively goes to her belly. I call the cops. They come out, take a report, but they're shrugging like it's a neighborhood dispute. Technically, one of them says, "If the hoe had reason to believe you were storing construction materials." I cut him off. Construction materials? That's a stroller. He shrugs again. You'll probably need to file a civil complaint. That's when I see Sarah's expression change. She's not angry. She's not sad. She's gone quiet. Focused. She nods at the officer, thanks him politely, and walks inside like she's mentally calculating something. I know that face. That's the same face she had when she helped intercept a phishing ring targeting federal employees. The same face she had when she testified in a Senate hearing on domestic cyber threats. Karen just opened a door she cannot close. Later that night, I find Sarah at her laptop. She's already downloaded the HOA's pathetic little website, and I use that term loosely. It's a WordPress site with Comic Sans font and a donation button that links directly to Karen's PayPal. Sarah's eyes flick across the screen like she's scanning code. She doesn't say anything at first. Then, finally, she turns to me and goes, "They're not registered with the state. They're impersonating a legal entity." Then she smiles. Small, cold. They're done. The next day, Karen struts by our front yard with her yappy dog, wearing oversized sunglasses like she's avoiding paparazzi. She pauses, gives our lawn a disapproving look, and pulls out her phone to take a photo. I wave. She doesn't wave back, just marches on, like a sitcom villain, hips swinging with self-righteous fury. Sarah doesn't even flinch. She's already moved past anger and into strategy. Then, as if we weren't already living in a parody of suburban hell, Karen sends out an email to the entire neighborhood listserv. Subject line, "Community alert violator escalates." In it, she claims we refused to comply, staged a false police report, and might be hiding hazardous materials in our shed. She even hints that Sarah is mentally unstable due to hormonal imbalance. It's signed, "In Community Safety, Cynthia B." That email? Big mistake. Sarah reads it once, screenshots it, then opens a new document titled Evidence Log. I glance over her shoulder. She's compiling timestamps, location data, and headers from every HOA email. She's already traced the server's IP and identified a shady web hosting company, used for overseas gambling sites. I ask her if she wants help. She says, "Just keep the lawn exactly to 0.5 inches tall. I need them to feel safe." 3 hours later, she has something. I can see it in her eyes. Her expression flickers with that look she gets when she sees an opening. I ask what it is. She smirks and says, "They just gave me probable cause." Then, around midnight, our sprinkler system sputters, then hisses, groans, and floods our side yard. Not a huge deal until I realize the water pressure in our kitchen just died. I follow the piping out back, and guess what? There's a jury-rigged extension hose spliced into our underground well system. Karen's backyard, to fences over, is suspiciously green, even during a dry spell. And that's when I know she's been stealing our water. And the best part? She did it by tapping into the line my wife just legally registered, as part of a federal pilot program for rural infrastructure protection. Meaning Karen's about to be investigated by the Department of Homeland Security. Just when you think it couldn't possibly get any worse for her, she invites herself over for a surprise compliance inspection. Next chapter. Let's just say the tea she drinks isn't the only thing that gets served. Karen showed up on our porch at exactly 01 p.m. the next day, with a clipboard, a smug expression, and the kind of knock that makes you instinctively want to lock every door in the house. Sarah opened it with the calm of someone about to dismantle a system, one polite smile at a time. Karen didn't even pretend to ask for permission. She announced, "This is a formal HOA compliance inspection. Your failure to respond to our previous notices indicates escalating noncompliance. We'll be documenting for record-keeping purposes." Then she stepped 1 foot inside the threshold. Uninvited. I opened my mouth to object, but Sarah gently touched my arm and said, "It's okay. We have nothing to hide." I recognized her tone immediately. That wasn't surrender. That was bait, and Karen took it without hesitation. The tour began in the living room, which Karen ignored entirely because there was no visible crime against landscaping in there. She headed straight for the backyard like a woman on a mission to uncover buried contraband. Every few seconds, she'd scribble something on her clipboard or take pictures on her ancient Android phone. She snapped a photo of our freshly cut grass and muttered, "Still looks a bit aggressive," which made me want to ask what lawn looked passive to her. But again, Sarah didn't react. She simply offered Karen a glass of lemon tea and followed her like a gentle specter of doom. When Karen reached the shed, she didn't acknowledge that she'd already broken into it. Instead, she treated it like this was the first inspection. She peered inside with performative suspicion, as if the stroller had transformed overnight into a meth lab. Sarah leaned casually against the fence and asked, "Would you like to see our permits for the foundation installation?" Karen froze. "Permits?" she asked, suddenly off balance. "For what?" "For the concrete slab under the shed," Sarah replied smoothly. "It meets County Code 14.7 for auxiliary storage buildings. We filed it digitally. I'd be happy to email you the documents, although technically, you're not a registered municipal authority, so I'm not required to share anything with you." Karen blinked, like someone trying to process 3 insults hidden inside one sentence. She recovered by taking another pointless photo and declaring, "We're revising our guidelines to include stricter language on visual obstruction. This shed may fall into violation under new standards." Sarah nodded pleasantly. "Oh, are those new standards filed with the state HOA registry?" Karen hesitated. "They're in draft. Internal policy pending review," which was a long-winded way of saying she made them up on her couch while watching a home makeover show. After the inspection, Karen stood in our driveway and delivered what she probably thought was an official-sounding declaration. "You'll receive a follow-up report within 7 business days. I suggest you make arrangements to address multiple areas of concern. Continued disregard will result in formal proceedings." Then she turned on her heel and marched off without another word, her dog yipping behind her like a tiny foot soldier. Sarah waited until she was gone before calmly walking back inside, opening her laptop, and beginning what I can only describe as a slow-motion digital assassination. First, she installed 3 additional security cameras around our property, disguised, of course. One looked like a garden gnome. Another was hidden inside a fake birdhouse. The third was embedded in the solar light next to the mailbox. Then, she activated a metadata tracker that she'd previously only used during internal training at her job. Every email, every attachment sent from Karen's fake HOA address would now be quietly logged and mirrored to a secure folder on our cloud drive. I asked her what the end game was. She didn't even look up. Evidence documentation. Pattern of harassment. If she pushes one step further, we initiate a formal complaint with the State Consumer Protection Board and, if needed, a federal civil rights claim. She's operating an unlicensed organization, impersonating legal authority, while targeting us with discriminatory actions, specifically against a pregnant woman. I nodded like I understood all of that and then went outside to mow the lawn to exactly 2 inches. Just in case. We didn't want to give Karen anything real to latch onto. The plan was simple. Let her keep digging her own grave. Unfortunately, Karen wasn't the patient type. That very night, an email hit the neighborhood listserv with the subject line, "Urgent Community Safety Alert." It was from Karen's official HOA address, and it accused us, by name, of threatening behavior, possible hoarding of hazardous materials, and unstable conduct exacerbated by medical conditions. Sarah read the email once, silently, and then whispered, "She just crossed the line." Within an hour, Sarah drafted and filed a formal complaint with the State Attorney General's office, attaching every screenshot, every email header, and timestamp footage of Karen entering our shed. She included a note identifying herself as a Homeland Security employee and listed her credentials and security clearances. Then she CC'd the neighborhood listserv and sent a separate email to Karen, attaching a copy of the complaint with a short, surgical message. "Cynthia, you have 48 hours to retract your defamatory statements, cease all unauthorized activity under your unregistered HOA, and formally acknowledge your unlawful entry onto our property. Failure to do so will result in legal action, both civil and federal. I suggest you consult legal counsel." I watched her send it. She didn't blink. The next morning, Karen's car was gone. By noon, 3 of her board members, yes, the fake HOA had resigned via group email. One of them even privately messaged me and said, "I thought this was just a neighborhood garden club. I had no idea she was breaking laws." Another said, "She told us your wife was unemployed and unstable. I'm so sorry." But Karen, she doubled down. That same evening, as if she wasn't already in enough hot water, she held a private emergency HOA board meeting at her house. The irony of calling it private when half the neighborhood saw folding chairs in her front yard wasn't lost on anyone. Karen stood at the top of her porch and delivered what sounded like a delusional State of the Union, announcing new enforcement measures for persistent violators and citing completely made-up codes, like Yard Act 40 to 217. She even claimed we'd been flagged by local enforcement. which was funny because we just had coffee with the actual police officer who lived 3 doors down, and he rolled his eyes so hard we thought he might sprain something. What Karen didn't know was that Sarah had already pulled the digital receipts on every one of her activities, and she had found something golden. Karen's fake HOA website. It was being hosted on a server previously used for a now-defunct sweepstakes scam that had been under investigation for data skimming, and the site had active forms collecting neighbor information, names, emails, addresses without any encryption or compliance notices. It wasn't just a violation. It was a potential felony. And that's when Sarah made a quiet phone call to a colleague in cybersecurity enforcement. She didn't say much, just gave her the domain, the hosting provider, and asked her to flag it for review. A day later, we got a phone call from a number Sarah instantly recognized. She answered, spoke briefly, and hung up with a nod. I asked what happened. She smiled and said, "They're opening an inquiry." And then, with perfect timing, Karen marched down our sidewalk the next morning with a new notice in hand, this time threatening to place a lien on our home. She knocked. Sarah opened the door. Karen didn't even speak. She just held out the paper. And that's when Sarah said, "Before you hand me anything, you should know the FBI may be reviewing your financial records by the end of the week." Karen blinked. Sarah stepped forward. "Do you really want to keep playing this game?" And that's when Karen did something I wasn't expecting. She smiled and said, "We'll see about that. So, game on." If you've never seen a grown woman host a secret suburban war council in her living room while pretending it's a book club, then let me introduce you to Karen's Tuesday night HOA board meeting. No agenda, no minutes, no legality. Just coffee, passive aggression, and poorly veiled threats. The invitation never reached us, obviously, but the reveal invitation came in the form of one of our neighbors, Greg from 3 houses down, sending us a text with a blurry Ring camera video and the caption, "UH, this seems about you." The video showed Karen standing in her doorway, whispering something to her inner circle of cardigan-wearing cronies. One of them was holding a manila folder thick with documents. Karen waved it like it was the Constitution. Sarah watched the video and said nothing for a moment. Then she opened her laptop and started typing. I asked what she was doing. She said, "I'm about to pull every recorded interaction we've had with that woman and compile it into an index PDF. Also, I'm sending this to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. They have a task force for this kind of thing." Her voice was calm, but her fingers were moving fast. That was the thing about her. She didn't yell, she didn't flinch, and she didn't threaten. She just got it done, surgically and quietly, the way you dismantle a bomb. Meanwhile, Karen was preparing her own kind of bomb. According to Greg, the meeting wasn't just about us. It was about restructuring the community enforcement model, which was a ridiculous way of saying she wanted to make it easier to find people who didn't bow to her whims. She proposed a new set of bylaws that included things like tiered penalty increases, mandatory visual inspections for non-compliant households, and this was the kicker, a rule that any homeowner who didn't attend HOA meetings would automatically forfeit their right to dispute fines. It was tyranny wrapped in Times New Roman and laminated for durability. We didn't respond. Not directly. Instead, Sarah sent an anonymous tip to a federal consumer rights watchdog, attaching a copy of the fake bylaws, screenshots from the HOA's shady website, and a short note that read, "This group is impersonating a legal authority to issue fines and collect funds under threat. Data collection practices are unsecured. There may be a broader pattern." She didn't sign her name. She didn't need to. Within 48 hours, we received a reply from someone with a .gov email address requesting further documentation. The subject line was, "Inquiry, Glen Maple Homeowners Association, Potential Violations." At this point, we were ready to sit back and let the machine of justice crank into gear. But Karen, of course, couldn't help herself. She needed to win. That's why, 3 days later, she tried to serve us with a formal lien notice, claiming we owed over $100 in escalating non-compliance fees. The paper was typed in all caps and misspelled the word penalty twice. It also included an administrative fee for the inspection she forced her way into, which, by the way, she had no authority to conduct. She left the notice folded under a decorative rock on our front porch, as if she were a medieval tax collector. Sarah photographed it, logged the timestamp, and added it to the folder labeled Karen, Civil Violations. That folder was now 118 pages long. She printed a copy just in case. Then came the real twist. Karen's little hole website, the one hosted on a server known for housing expired sweepstakes scams, had been flagged and reported. One morning, she logged in to update her fake policy documents and instead saw a red banner that read, "Account suspended, under review for terms violation." She lost her mind. According to a very amused neighbor, she spent the next 2 hours on the phone, pacing around her backyard in slippers and yelling phrases like free speech and community autonomy into the void. Meanwhile, Sarah was already 3 steps ahead, forwarding the latest legal updates to the Department of Homeland Security's Internal Oversight Office. There was now enough evidence for a federal inquiry into Karen's use of homeowner data, specifically how she'd been storing and misusing it through a non-compliant server. But what none of us expected, what truly took this whole saga into cinematic territory, was the moment the FBI showed up. It happened the following week, just before noon. A black SUV parked calmly in front of Karen's house. Two plainclothes agents stepped out, wearing casual button-ups but carrying that unmistakable federal posture. One of them knocked. Karen answered, probably thinking it was another package or a neighbor wanting gardening advice. Instead, she was met with badges. The conversation was short, very short. One of the agents asked to come inside. The other waited outside, casually surveying the area. Within minutes, a second vehicle arrived. This time it was marked a DHS enforcement vehicle, with 2 agents who looked like they could spot a digital violation from a mile away. They entered with a laptop bag and a warrant. By this point, several neighbors had come outside, pretending to water plants or check mail. I stood on my porch with a cup of coffee, watching Karen's empire collapse in real time. She tried to act calm. She tried to smile, but her body language betrayed her. Tight shoulders, nervous glances. That little twitch in her eyes she usually reserved for spotting a weed in someone's yard. The agents emerged 20 minutes later, carrying her laptop and several folders. They didn't say much, but one of them did glance at me as they passed and gave a small nod. Karen stood frozen in her doorway, watching them leave with her entire digital kingdom in a bag. She looked smaller somehow, less regal, more, very much screwed. Later that afternoon, I asked Sarah what the charges might be. She said, "Depends. If it's just data misuse, maybe civil fines. But if she was storing personal info without consent and collecting money under false authority, that could cross into criminal fraud. And if she accessed our property records, that's an identity crime." She sipped her tea. "They'll figure it out." By evening, Karen had gone radio silent. No new emails, no Facebook rants, no passive-aggressive lawn inspections. Her flag, usually flapping proudly above her porch, was suddenly missing. The next day, she didn't show up to her morning dog walk. The day after that, she skipped the HOA board meeting she herself had scheduled. But, of course, in true Karen fashion, she couldn't disappear entirely. Not yet. The night after the federal visit, she dropped a letter in our mailbox. It wasn't typed. It was handwritten, in cursive, with purple ink like a weird apology from a Victorian ghost. It read, "I hope you're happy. You've endangered the harmony of this neighborhood. I only ever wanted to keep things safe, but now everything is falling apart. You should be ashamed of yourselves. No signature, no return address. Just petty blame wrapped in glittery penmanship." Sarah read it, laughed once, and dropped it into the evidence folder without a word. The neighborhood, once quietly tense, now hummed with the electricity of shared relief. People began whispering about the FBI visit, the shutdown of the HOA site, the fact that Karen was suddenly hiding behind closed blinds. A few even emailed us privately to say thank you. Apparently, we weren't the only ones she'd targeted, just the only ones who fought back. Then, just as we were settling into the idea that the worst was behind us. We got a certified letter from the county clerk's office. Karen had filed paperwork. She was trying to make the HOA real. She'd submitted documents to register Glen Maple HOA as a legitimate organization, with herself listed as president for life. That's when Sarah smiled in a way I hadn't seen before. It wasn't satisfaction. It was anticipation. She said, "Good, now we get to take it down publicly." And that's when the real fun began. The thing about registering an HOA is that it opens you up to real oversight, real legal consequences, real government scrutiny. Karen, in all her hubris, didn't realize that by trying to make her dictatorship official. She had just invited the law in through the front door and handed it a cold drink. The documents she filed with the county were full of bold claims, fake signatures, and an omission statement that sounded like it had been plagiarized from a corporate brochure on fascism. She listed over 30 homes as part of the HOA, many of which never signed anything, never voted, and never gave consent, including ours. Sarah stared at the scanned copy for all of 10 seconds before she said, "She just forged homeowner data. That's wire fraud if she sent it digitally." Within an hour, Sarah had written a formal objection to the county clerk's office, citing misrepresentation, forged names, and coercive tactics. She included a notarized statement and a request for a temporary injunction to halt the registration. But that was just the surface layer. Behind the scenes, she was prepping the full takedown. She'd already compiled the footage of the illegal shed break-in, the surveillance evidence, and every violation Karen had committed under the guise of authority she didn't have. She was building a case not just to stop the whole registration, but to dismantle everything Karen had built permanently. Then came the court hearing. It was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon in the Community District Court building. That looked more like a DMV than a place where justice happened. Karen showed up in a pantsuit that screamed local power trip, carrying a binder of pre-printed screenshots and several pages of what looked like aggressively highlighted neighborhood gossip. She strutted in like she was about to accept an award. Sarah, by contrast, wore a loose cardigan over her maternity dress and carried nothing but a slim briefcase, an USB stick. She didn't need theatrics. She had evidence. The judge, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and zero patience for nonsense, opened the hearing by asking for statements. Karen went first, and predictably, she spun a tale about neighborhood unity, moral decay, and how our refusal to comply was threatening the safety and aesthetic harmony of the community. She claimed we had endangered others by refusing to maintain our lawn, hoarding supplies, and acting aggressively toward her volunteers. Sarah didn't interrupt. She sat silently, hands folded over her belly, letting Karen bury herself in her own self-importance. Then it was our turn. Sarah stood, introduced herself calmly, and handed the judge the USB. On it was a streamlined presentation that included video footage of the shed break-in, copies of the fake violation letters, metadata logs from the HOA emails, financial documents showing Karen accepting payments into her personal PayPal, and finally, copies of the state and federal complaints already in motion. She ended her statement with the quiet bombshell that Karen had submitted false names to the county in her registration, 3 of whom had already filed affidavits denying any involvement. The courtroom fell silent. Even Karen looked rattled. The judge took a long breath and said, "This matter appears to exceed the scope of a neighborhood dispute. Given the evidence submitted, I'm issuing a temporary suspension of the HOA registration pending further investigation. Additionally, I'm referring this case to the county prosecutor for review." Karen tried to object, but the judge cut her off. "If you speak again without being addressed, I'll hold you in contempt." That was the first time I'd seen Karen sit down quietly. We left the courtroom without a word to her. Back at home, we found a handful of neighbors gathered near our driveway. One of them, an older woman who had lived on the block for 20 years, walked up and said, "Thank you. She's been terrorizing people for months." Another neighbor handed Sarah a small bouquet and said, "For the baby and for being a badass." Within a week, the news broke. Not big news, just a local report in the neighborhood newsletter and a mention on the county website. But it was enough. Unregistered HOA under investigation for fraud, harassment, and unauthorized data collection. Karen's name wasn't printed, but everyone knew. And when the story started circulating, so did the calls. Former HOA members started coming forward. Turns out Karen had been fining elderly residents for leaving porch lights on till 8. She threatened to report a single mom for housing multiple vehicles. She'd even warned a veteran with PTSD that his backyard flag was a visual disruption. All of them were quiet victims, too tired or intimidated to fight. But now, with her power dissolving, they found their voices. The cherry on top came when the IRS got involved. Sarah, being meticulous, had flagged Karen's personal PayPal as a possible source of unreported income during one of her complaints. And wouldn't you know it, Karen had collected over $10,000 in fines over 2 years, none of which had been reported as income. Within days, she received a summons for audit. The neighborhood transformed. The HOA sign Karen had installed at the community entrance was quietly removed. The fake newsletter stopped arriving. Her inner circle either ghosted her or issued public apologies. Even her dog, who once barked like it had a personal vendetta against everyone, stopped making noise. Karen herself? She retreated. Blinds drawn, porch lights off, no more morning patrols. Occasionally, we'd see her walking her dog at night, sunglasses on, as if trying to sneak past the memory of who she used to be. Meanwhile, we held a garden party. Just a small one, nothing fancy. Lawn chairs, iced tea, cookies, a little sign that read "No Fine Zone" hung over the gate. Neighbors came and went, exchanging stories and laughter. One brought a cake that said "Rip HOA" in big red letters. It wasn't subtle, but it was perfect. Sarah sat under a canopy, sipping decaf and cradling her belly, looking the most peaceful I'd seen her in weeks. A month later, we welcomed our daughter into the world. Strong, healthy, loud enough to wake the neighbors. We named her Lily. Karen never sent a card, but she did receive one, a legal notice informing her that her request to reinstate the HOA had been permanently denied. Her personal liability case was being escalated, and several neighbors had filed a civil suit against her for harassment and damages. As for us, we never heard from Karen again. Aaron still trimmed to exactly to 0.5 inches, our shed upgraded, secured, and now storing nothing but peace. And my wife, still undefeated. So, if you ever find yourself dealing with a Karen who thinks she runs the neighborhood, just remember, some people build fences, others build cases. And the next time someone breaks into a pregnant woman's shed over a $29 grass fine, they better pray she doesn't work in counterterrorism.